Up next, David Palmer of DC Palmer LLC joins Authentically Detroit to discuss his team's research regarding Detroit's down payment assistance program and how it impacts home ownership in the city. But first, this week's hot takes from Bridge Detroit. Detroit's lawyer says city council doesn't need to follow surveillance law. And Detroit Academy temporarily closes amid high rate of flu-like illness. Keep it locked. Authentically Detroit starts after these messages.
Founded in 2021, the Stoudemire is a membership-based community recreation and wellness center centrally located on the east side of Detroit. Membership in the Stoudemire is available on a sliding scale for up to $20 per year or 20 hours of volunteer time. The Stoudemire offers art, dance, and fitness classes, community meetings and events, resource fairs, pop-up events, the neighborhood tech hub, and more. Members who are residents of the east side have access to exclusive services in the Wellness Network. Join today and live well, play well, be well. Visit ecndetroit.org.
Bridge Detroit is your news and engagement platform that is telling the stories of Detroiters rooted by community priorities. Started in 2020 by Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Stephen Henderson, the newsroom has already established its footing as the go-to source for hyper-local perspectives that ask the hard questions, brings accountability, and searches out real solutions. It's free to become a member of this award-winning news organization. Visit bridgedetroit.com today to sign up to receive the news delivered right to your inbox. Bridge Detroit, by Detroiters, for Detroiters.
Hey, y'all, it's Orlando. We just want to let you know that the views and opinions expressed during this podcast episode are those of the co-hosts and guests and not their sponsoring institutions. Now, let's start the show. Hello, Detroit and the world. Welcome to another episode of Authentically Detroit, broadcasting live from the Cass Corridor or Midtown at the WDET studios. We are a content partner to BridgeDetroit.com. I'm Orlando Bailey.
And I'm Donna Givens-Davidson.
Thank y'all so much for listening in and supporting our efforts to build a platform of authentic voices for real people in the city of Detroit. Again, we want you to we want you to rate and subscribe to our podcast on all platforms. Today, Donna and I are joined by David Palmer of DC Palmer LLC. Donna and David, how is this blessed and partly sunny day finding each of you?
Well, it's a beautiful day. Really enjoying the fact that the weather is getting a little warmer.
Me too.
I was inside most of the day. I think I drove over here, and Dave was asking if I enjoyed the good weather on my drive here.
You're like, what weather?
I'm like, what weather? I was so busy, I didn't notice the weather. No, but I'm enjoying the day. It's great to have spring.
David, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for the invitation.
I know you're an old podcast pro, but welcome to our podcast.
I'm honored to be here. I've been listening for a long time, and happy spring, Detroit.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. How you feeling?
Still here. Happy to be here. Seeing things get cleaned up. Got my tulips blooming. Got the peonies coming soon.
Come on.
Life is good in Rosedale Park.
All right. Flower Day is on its way.
Yeah.
It's on its way. I'm doing okay today. I saw my therapist today, and my life is not the mess that I thought it was. You know, like, I don't know if it's a Virgo trait. It probably is. Like, I think we are somewhat harder on ourselves than we are on anyone else. And, you know, like, there are some things, you know, that I'm contending with, you know, like
Why
in my
am
brain.
I not perfect yet?
Why am I not perfect yet? What is going on? Why am I not perfect? And, you know, it was my first time seeing my therapist since December. It just hasn't happened. And I learned that my life is not the mess that I think it is. And I am sitting in that, and I am enjoying the fact that since December, I've not made a mess of my life. My therapist made me feel good, and I feel very proud. She also challenged me in some areas because she does that kind of thing, but it's not as bad as it's not bad at all. And I thought it was bad. So
Yeah, you know, that's funny because you said, you know, it's a Virgo thing. Orlando and I both being Virgos. Let me just take the baton and say that we like for things to be ordered and make sense. And when things don't always make sense and they're always orderly and predictable, there's this feeling of loss of control, right?
Yeah.
Like I need to rein things back in so I understand them, and life is messy. And it's one of those things that as you get older, you learn to accept the messiness that is called life, that you can't fix everything and control.
What do you mean I can't fix everything?
You cannot fix everything. You just have to let some things be and really focus on those things that you can change. And usually those are some things in yourself, but not even everything in yourself.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Because, we are who we are. And, for so long I tried to change myself. I was like, I shouldn't be like this. I should be like this. And I keep on showing up as me. Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow. When was this period? This is really interesting. When was this?
What do you mean?
Like you said for a long time you wanted to change yourself. When was this
in my
span?
wedding vows, and in my wedding vows, when I said, all of my life I've been too much, I've been too serious, I've been too whatever, and I've always felt like I'm too much. My personality is not just this calm, easygoing. I talked about it yesterday, kind of, party girl personality. I'm not necessarily the most fun person in the room. I'm too serious. And people are like, smile, or we're just trying to have fun. Change the subject, And then when I started dating Kevin, I was like, just enough. He liked me just as I am. And it's like the first time I've really felt and learned to accept myself as not being a person who is too much, but just accepting myself as God made me.
Wow. So this is recently, like within the last 5-6 years.
Well, it's been about 5 years since we started dating. Yes. And so prior to that, it was always this,
this tug of war, this tension.
Like, I don't want to be like this. I want to be able to go hang out and be fun.
Oh my God, Donna Givens Davison. Okay, because I could spend the rest of the hour interviewing you about that, because it is at 33, and can I tell your age? And almost at 60, right? We're having this same conversation, and you just got it at 55. Right. And here I am at 33 still contending with it. So this thing that we are contending with knows no age. I don't know if I necessarily want to change myself, but I want everything to be how I want it to be. Even so, there are aspects to me that I'm like, I need to evolve in this area and change in that area. But you're saying that, you know what? You are enough. In every iteration of your life, in every role, in every area that you step foot in, you are enough, right? You can always do the work to be a better person and show up the best you can be, but your soul, your core, who you are, is enough.
One of the things that Kevin helped me with, right, was he says, I had such high expectations for myself.
Yes,
that
me
if
too.
I don't meet these exceptionally high expectations, I'm always feeling like a failure.
Yep.
So I'm the type of person I can go out and do public speaking, and I'm like, I forgot to say this, and I'm just mad. Or I can be at my wedding and actually delete the file with my vows and have to figure out how to say. Remember that?
Yeah.
And have to do it off the cuff, and it's like, I forgot to say that, and I spend so much time lamenting and critiquing myself, and other people are like, that's great, and I'm like, it was? I had no idea, because the first time we published an episode of Authentically Detroit and it went live,
I remember this conversation.
I was so
you were petrified.
Scared. I was like, oh my goodness, I didn't say things right. I stumbled over words. I didn't get this right. And so learning how to understand that my expectations for myself, my thoughts about how I should be, don't really match with anything real.
And
that,
so good.
That I just need to learn to enjoy, and it takes away the enjoyment of things, right? Because when you're so busy trying to get everything just right, you can't enjoy it. What's happening?
Yeah, it's so funny. I remember saying that I think my perfectionism cannot be the enemy of completion, especially when we're talking about my work, right? I will hold on to something forever and ever because I wanted it to be perfect. This is, Donna, God, this is a fascinating conversation that we don't have time to get into.
We don't.
But we should. You are enough.
Let's dig into it and have maybe get a therapist or somebody to do some on-air therapy. No, I mean, really talking about you are enough. Do you ever feel that, Dave?
You've got to manage expectations and the reality of the attachments that you have. Because being attached to conclusions will only cause you pain no matter the situation, right? So as a Scorpio with Virgo rising, I know what you're talking about from the astrological analysis standpoint. So that's fascinating. But, ultimately we can do what we can do. And I think both of you do so much for this community. And knowing that people at your caliber have these kinds of things going on in your head, I think is a good thing for the rest of the public to kind of grapple with.
Well,
is that we all have imposter syndrome to some extent. We've all screwed up something, and I've done public speaking for a long time too, and it's like, oh yeah, I forgot to say that thing I was supposed to say, but people still come up to you afterwards and say, that had an impact on me. Right. How do we learn how to do more with the resources that we have?
And I think the challenge is also when you're in a helping profession or a helping field, there's never enough that you can do to address a situation. So there's always this feeling of massive. Trying to get to this big place. And we're going to be talking about housing and home ownership. And, housing is such a frustrating topic because we don't do a great job of it in this nation, right? We have a lot of people who don't have housing and a whole lot of promises and ideals and programs. And somehow they're not enough. And then when you try to address it, there's this feeling of I have to do more, I have to do more, I have to do more. And I think that's also part. It's not just imposter syndrome. It's also this feeling of sometimes the futility of what you're trying to do that will never get there. And so being able to be satisfied with incremental steps or finding some solutions or some things that you can enjoy so that you can feel accomplished is another challenge, don't you think?
Yeah, the system is devoid of decency in most ways. From a public policy perspective, we don't do a really good job caring about humans. You look at the time period post-World War II, and most of Europe turns into social democracy so that they can have things like universal health care, access to child care, all of the things that they were worried about causing revolutions in Europe post-war. Here, we doubled down on trickle-down theory that has been disproven so many times that it just doesn't make sense anymore. So we have what we have, and we're all fighting the uphill battle to try to make things better for normal humans.
I mean, I could have this conversation all hour. We gotta, thank y'all. This is authentic, right?
Here we go.
All right, it's time for Hot Takes, where we run down some of the week's top headlines in the city of Detroit. And for Hot Takes, Detroit's lawyer says city council doesn't need to follow surveillance law. This is by Malachi Barrett over at Bridge Detroit. Here's the rundown. Detroit's top lawyer is arguing that the city council can approve contracts for surveillance technology regardless of whether members follow an ordinance which guarantees public oversight of how those tools are used. The Corporation Counsel, Charles Ramey, and attorneys representing Detroit residents who sued the city last November outlined their arguments in the Thursday hearing before Wayne County Circuit Court Judge David Allen. The lawsuit centers around city council illegally approving the contracts with SoundThinking, previously known as ShotSpotter. Did y'all know they changed their name? Yes, they did, to expand a controversial gunshot detection software across the city. Here's the quote. Even if there had been complete disregard for the ordinance, city council had the ability to approve the procurement, Ramey said during the Thursday virtual hearing. The reason is that they are the decision maker on procurements. Attorneys with the Detroit Justice Center, Sugar Law Center, and Economic and Social Justice and Sult's Law argue residents were deprived of key information that would have helped shape public opinion on police surveillance tools. They're aiming to nullify two contracts worth about $8.5 million that were approved last year. Allen said it's a scary thought to consider that the council doesn't need to comply with the procurement law. Allen ended the hearing with a commitment to issue a ruling on May 17th. SoundThinking, which is ShotSpotter, has contracts with cities across the country to cover high crime areas with microphones to detect gunshots and alert police. Detroit's city council approved two contracts with SoundThinking, one to extend a contract previously approved in 2020 and another to expand listening devices to new areas across Detroit. SoundThinking did not immediately respond to Bridges' request for comment. It was a manipulated outcome, John Philo, an attorney with Sugar Law Center, said during the Thursday hearing. The point of the ordinance is to inform those citizens about the full scope of what's going to happen, where it's going to happen, how it's going to happen, and how the city is going to address those concerns, end quote. Donna, what say you?
Well, first things first, I don't think that Charles Ramey is still the corporation counsel. I believe that's Conrad Mallett.
Yeah, he worked.
And
Yeah,
that
he's one of
Charles Ramey was the former corporation counsel. I think he's in private practice now, representing the city through a private contract.
Okay.
But I think we may want to clarify that. Because I thought it was interesting to see this name resurface. That's the only thing, because he was the person who argued on behalf of the city. It feels like he's the king of bad arguments, and Conrad Mallon did not allow himself to go to court and say these things. Who wants to say that the city council does not have to follow the law? I agree with Judge Allen. It's a scary thought to hear the corporation council say the city council is not beholden to a law. It's absolutely scary. And I think that if the law and the city charter are in conflict with each other, then we should defer to the law. But that's me, because I remember when we were trying to revise the city charter and we were told, wait a minute, you cannot revise the city charter this way because it's in conflict with the law. So what gives here? That said, I'm also offended by the name Sound Thinking. It's actually an insult. It makes me even angrier at Shot Spotter than Shot Spotter, because Sound Thinking implies that if I had sound thinking, I would agree that it made sense to chase after gunshots after they were shot and apprehend criminals, and this was the sound way to do so.
$7.5 million contract.
Well, it's a $7.5 million contract to know where the gunshots come from.
Without efficacy, without proven efficacy, demonstrative effects.
Why don't we just take phone calls and say, hey, there's a gunshot right here around my block? And if we responded to those 911 calls where people spotted shots around the block from them or across the street from them, we wouldn't need this technology. We have technology. It's called 911.
And it's called people.
It's called people.
And
language. And then we can take that $7.8 million and invest it in something that actually makes sense for citizens of the city of Detroit. I think that hopefully the judge has suggested that he is leaning towards invalidating these contracts. However, we know that the city will stop at no expense and continue to pursue whatever they need to pursue to keep this contract in place. So I would imagine an appeal will take place.
You know, the thing that concerns me about this and just about ShotSpotter overall, in addition to, the city, the council may be potentially breaking the law, is the fact that this contract has a direct correlation with neighborhood morale and culture. I don't think I want to be around if the police is responding. I don't think I want to be walking the block. I don't think I want to be outside of my house when the police is responding to a shot spotter alert that a shot had taken place in my neighborhood. I'm not necessarily sure it's safe.
Well,
or
geographical
that I'll be okay.
guilt. It's
Right.
like, well, you are in this, not guilt by association with geography.
Yeah.
It's crazy to me. And it just plays into racist thinking. I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And we know police don't always gently arrest people. So you could have all kinds of police brutality incidents. Somebody tries to run, they get shot for running. They had nothing to do with it, but they see the police and they want to run. And, to be honest, some of us want to run when we see the police, right? They can be intimidating. And so I think that when you start to treat an area like it's under martial law, and there's certain people in the community who feel like it's under martial law, the question is, does that community become safer or not? I say they don't. But I also don't believe that democracy is ever a bad thing. And if what that means is you give the public more information and give the public time to weigh in and deliberate before a vote is taken, it seems to me as though that makes sense. And whenever people want to shortchange democracy and rush processes, and you see this happen a lot of times with this mayor, it calls a lot of things into question. Because if the truth is the truth, then why are you trying to rush a process?
David, we got 2 minutes. Go ahead.
ShotSpotter's a mess. It's a waste of money. There's no proven efficacy. They don't even make arrests off it. And I think we have a surveillance problem in this country that doesn't solve the solutions that it's sold for. Just like in the days after 9/11, we get all this crazy airport security, but you can find plenty of reports out there that you can get all kinds of crazy things through the airports. They test it all the time, and it doesn't really work that well. So they're preparing us to be, prisoners in our own society for the private profit of corporations, which I think is fundamentally unsound thinking and bad public policy. So.
Prisoners of our society for the profit of private corporations. David coming with the zingers. Listen, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about this other story around the Detroit Academy that had to temporarily close amid a high rate of a flu-like illness. More on that and with David Palmer when we come back. Keep it locked.
Have you always dreamed of being on the airwaves? Well, the Detroit Eastside Engaged Podcast Network, or DEEP for short, is here to make that dream a reality. Located inside the Stoudemire, the DEEP Network offers studio space and production staff to help get your podcast idea off the ground. Doesn't take a whole lot of work to get started. Just visit the Authentically Detroit page at ecn-detroit.org or call Sarah at 313-948-0344.
Founded in 2021, the Stoudemire is a membership-based community recreation and wellness center centrally located on the east side of Detroit. Membership in the Stoudemire is available on a sliding scale for up to $20 per year or 20 hours of volunteer time. The Stoudemire offers art, dance, and fitness classes, community meetings and events, resource fairs, pop-up events, the Neighborhood Tech Hub, and more. Members who are residents of the east side have access to exclusive services in the Wellness Network. Join today and live well, play well, be well. Visit ecndetroit.org.
We are back here on Authentically Detroit for Hot Takes. Detroit Academy temporarily closes amid high rate of flu-like illness. This is by my colleague Michael Walker at Bridge Detroit. So Marcus Garvey Academy on Detroit's east side temporarily closed last week due to high levels of illness spreading among students. The quote says, this week, the school has experienced an unusually high rate of flu-like symptoms, including student fevers and vomiting, namely at the early grade levels, DPSCD said in a statement. We have been actively communicating with the Detroit Health Department about these cases, and we have mutually agreed that the best course of action right now is to close the school until this week to allow families to monitor children's symptoms and to deep clean the school. So Marcus Garvey principal Wakita Winston laid out the school plans for the coming weeks on Friday and stressed that the staff would be cautious, making masks available at all building entrances and ensuring students are properly washing their hands. The quote says, we are strongly encouraging all students to wear masks. It is not mandatory because we do not have any COVID protocols at this time, Winston told families, students, and staff during a virtual informational meeting. The Detroit Health Department is also working with the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, in addition to DPSCD, to monitor and trace all reported illnesses involving students from the school. Garvey staff began receiving notices Monday of preschool and kindergarten students getting sick. The school reached out to the Detroit Health Department, which recommended disinfecting classrooms as more cases were reported Tuesday. The district decided to close the academy for the remainder of the week. DPSCD also noted that a kindergarten student from Marcus Garvey died 2 weeks ago. The medical examiner has not yet determined the cause of death. Donna, what say you?
Well, you know, my granddaughter attends Marcus Garvey in preschool, so this hits really, really close to home. And I happen to know that, parents were notified of closures by way of a robocall. There was a kindergarten student at that school who died, and they did send home flyers, but it seems like the school could do more to help allay parents' fears. I'm just going to be honest with you. When you hear that a 5 or 6 year old child has died while in school, to say it's shocking,
While in school?
For a disease that they believe may be connected, because they connected these cases and said, well, one student has died and we're just, going to clean the school. And so the fear is, of course, elevated to a super high level, but also the trauma and loss to children who may know the student. I want to know what the school district is doing around that loss of that kindergarten student. I know some of the staff at ECN know the student and the family, and so talked about, just the fact that their own children were impacted. Yeah. So I think that when there's death in DPS, and we see this when we talk to a lot of our young people, you don't always employ social workers and other resources in the same way you do in suburban school districts, where you hear about people coming in and talking to the children about what this means and helping them work through their emotions. I would like, there's this talk about flu-like symptoms, and we know that there's flu-like symptoms. We also know that there are a number of communicable diseases that are out there. Is this COVID? Is this flu?
What is it?
What
I
is
want to know
this?
what it is.
Let's talk about the kinds of illnesses that are spreading rather than saying, and I believe the health department was quoted as saying, well, I don't really want to get into the types of illness, but they gave one disease, which is like a flu, but it's not a flu, that causes vomiting. I just feel as though we need more information.
We do, because I remember your daughter keeping your granddaughter home for a couple of days because she wasn't feeling well. Like I immediately went to that, and I'm like, oh no, what is this? And it literally could have been anyone.
It could have been anyone.
It could have been anyone.
It could have been anyone, although the different symptoms. These are a lot of throwing up and nausea. So there's different kinds of symptoms. I just think, again, let's be clear. Children, you had in Focus Hope, you had, what is it, the hand and foot and mouth disease?
Oh Lord, no.
Hand, foot,
don't start
whatever.
me to
There was
lie.
a
That's
disease.
my
They
grandmother
closed
used
the
to say, "Don't start me to
preschool
lie."
there was a preschool at Focus Hope that was closed.
Okay.
What is the state of illness among children in our community? What are we doing to prevent it? What signs should parents be looking for? It's not just these two schools. I think there was another school where a sibling of a student from Marcus Garvey also experienced similar symptoms, and there were some students, but they didn't name the school. And I know that you don't want to alarm people, but I think when you don't want to alarm people, give them information, have community meetings. And then I also think it would be a really good idea to inform organizations like ours, where some of the parents and some of the family members
Who are
plugged in, we can help provide information and help people address that.
I think that's been the theme for the last couple months. It's like there can't be too much information, right? There can't be too much transparency and accountability. David, do you have anything on this?
I think it speaks to the challenges we have in the healthcare system overall. Getting access to information, I would push back a little bit on too much information, because if it's too much information that isn't vetted, sourced, and cited, then what are you doing other than adding to the hot mess of conspiracy theories and bad data? So if we had universal health care and folks had access to the healthcare services that they need wherever they are and whatever they need, then we'd be having a different conversation. It wouldn't necessarily all be on the shoulders of one school district or one principal and one administrator who then take in, the inputs that come from families that are rightfully concerned.
Well,
so goes back to access to healthcare for me. And, do you have good information? Or are you on your phone looking up the thing that's on the website that is tracking your personal data and more interested in that than giving you good vetted data, because you should be having that conversation with your physician?
Yeah. I mean, a couple things. Number one, I don't want to put this on the principal, the teachers, or anybody at that school building. I want to say that we have a Michigan Department of Public Health for a reason, and we have a Detroit Health Department for a reason. And so I'm hoping, or is it the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services? I think it's reorganized to include that and other things. But we have these departments for a reason. We have civil servants for a reason. Tell us what you know. Tell us what you're investigating, because nature hates a vacuum, right? And so if I don't hear from people who are professionals who have enough knowledge to help me understand this is what we're investigating, I'm going to hear from my neighbor. And the rumors are even more dangerous than having people say these are the kinds of things it may be. I just think tell people as much as you can so they can be informed and know what you're looking for, and that they're not hearing rumors or engaged in the kind of suspicions that make it really hard to maintain that trust, because we see that during the COVID crisis, the height of the COVID crisis, there's a breakdown in trust in healthcare systems, period. And this does not contribute.
It was laid bare.
Laid bare.
So, more on that. Until then, for the folks who listen to this show who send their young people, their children, our babies to Marcus Garvey, be careful, and continue to hold. This is the piece that is so important. Continue to hold these government offices responsible for sharing accurate information. So the Detroit Health Department and the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, y'all make sure y'all are communicating. One of the parents from Garvey told us that they didn't learn about the death of the student until news broke about it. And I think that's unacceptable. So I think that our information systems, our government systems can do a better job of sharing information to folks that it immediately impacts in real time. But we want to switch gears. We want to talk to David. But before we do that, if you have stories, if you have news items that you want discussed on Authentically Detroit, you can hit us up on our socials at Authentically Detroit, or you can email us at authenticallydetroit@gmail.com. So at the end of March, Detroit announced the launch of a down payment assistance program aimed at lower income earners who may be able to afford a monthly mortgage down payment, but don't have enough savings for the down payment, on a monthly mortgage payment, Today's guest, David Palmer, and his team at DC Palmer LLC conducted research and analysis on the program. So he's here today to discuss some of their key takeaways and findings. Donna, you remember we talked about this program on this show when it first was announced. David.
Yes.
Tell us about DC Palmer LLC. What is it?
So that's Think, Visualize, Do Tank. We've got lots of think tanks who write lots of good reports and fill shelves in libraries with lots of great information. But unless you visualize it and make that information accessible to normal humans, then how do you do anything with it? Mm-hmm. So I'm always in the mode of thinking about research questions, data, and explaining stories. How do you visualize that so that folks can get something meaningful out of the investment of time and effort? And then what are we going to do about it on the other side? So I have to say that in the real estate world, I'm an associate broker licensed in the state of Michigan, and I'm affiliated with Realty Experts. And Realty Experts is based in Ypsilanti, and I manage the Detroit office for our company. So DC Palmer LLC is the Think, Visualize, Do side, and when I do real estate, I'm under the Realty Experts umbrella. So that's the way licensing works in Michigan. So I've been working with folks that are taking the HUD down payment assistance program opportunity from homebuyer education courses for a long time. I've been teaching the realtors portion of that class since 2013, and one of the first things I say when I'm teaching that class is, "Hi, are you working with a realtor?" And 3/4 to 90% of the room raise their hands, and I say, "Congratulations, everything I say here today, you should vet back with the realtor that you're working with. I do not want you as a client if you are working with a realtor." So we try to set the baseline with fair access information on the front end. And when I see the down payment assistance programs through these HUD certified homebuyer education programs back during pandemic that we were just talking about, 2020, I said, oh my, let's take a look and see what these programs actually net for Detroiters. So I started poking around, and the HUD Detroit office said, oh, we can't give you the data that you're looking for. I said, okay, let's talk to DC. And DC said, HUD DC, no, we can't give you the data that you're looking for. So I sent a FOIA request, and they ignored it. And then I talked to Representative Tlaib, and I said, Rep. Tlaib, I don't come to you very often, except when I'm doing some public interest research that you can help with. And her team spent 11 months prying the data out of HUD to better understand the home buyer education ecosystem in the city of Detroit, where we have twice as many education opportunities through organizations in this town as does any other city in the United States with similar population. And the outcomes are what were important. So we had, about 7,400 people take these classes in the period we looked at between 14 and 19, and less than 20% reported actually buying a house, which is actually pretty consistent with home buying in the city of Detroit overall, because 2/3 of the city of Detroit has no functional mortgage market.
When you say functional, tell us what you mean by functional.
Traditional banks don't lend to black and brown people in the city of Detroit, and they never have.
Yep.
By design originally, and over time, programs have been rolled out, like the Community Reinvestment Act, and they've not proven to be functionally effective. So when I think about, neighborhoods across the city of Detroit, which ones are getting mortgages. You got downtown, midtown, the villages, University, Sherwood, Green Acres, the Grandmont, Rosedale communities is about 1/3 of the city. The rest of the city, single digits So I'll be sitting next to a banker during a conversation like this. Even, Donna convenes a housing work group, and I'm sitting next to a banker who's like listening to what's going on. And I pulled up the data and showed the banker how many mortgages their organization originated in the Chandler Park neighborhood that we were talking about at the moment. And it was fewer than the number of fingers we have in our hands in a decade. 10 years, less than 10 mortgages in this neighborhood by that lender.
Yeah. By any lender, though, right? How many by any lender? Because when you look at in the past decade, the decade beginning, it feels to me as though there's very little lending that takes place inside of neighborhoods like Chandler Park. It's one of those neighborhoods that's not considered bankable, right?
Well, all neighborhoods are bankable if you look at the rules, but if you look at the practice and see the results, it's really hard to figure it out. So, there again, you're parsing, regulatory environment with dog and pony shows by organizations that have flashy initiatives, and then the end results are rarely measured on the back end. So when I saw the down payment assistance program rolled out again by the city, because this has been repackaged a couple of times.
With 13 different banks.
Right. And, has anyone really taken the time to scrutinize the lending patterns of those 13 orgs?
Oh, well, we know what the lending patterns look like, but I want to know if you've done, an in-depth analysis of the ins and outs of that program, especially around, number one, the amount of money that they have to assist, right? That's probably only 400 mortgages, if that. But also, the parameters by which people can qualify. What have you found?
It's possible, but not plausible.
Mm-hmm.
If I had to wager, most of this money will be left on the table when the program sunsets at the end of next year and needs to be revised to be spent down entirely by 2026.
Yeah, that.
So if you go to DetroitDPA.org, so DetroitDPA.org, all the information that you need is right there.
Yeah, but
support be able to pull up the data,
for me though.
Right?
Why isn't this plausible? This announcement was met with a lot of cheer and excitement. Why do we think it will sunset without that money being spent down?
Because it's really hard to close a mortgage in the city of Detroit if you don't have a lot of resources. Mm-hmm. And I spent 3 hours with the local think tank staff talking through a real estate transaction from origin to closing. And we talked through all of the various points that I could identify where a real estate transaction goes sideways and doesn't end up closing. So if you look at the Home Mortgage Disclosure Act, HMDA, where they aggregate data on mortgages from everywhere in the country, and you look at the originations, or the number of mortgages that actually close versus mortgages that don't close, the reasons for why they don't close are conveniently vague. Just like with down payment assistance programs with lenders are typically attached to the CRA program, Community Reinvestment Act program. And there's no way to measure longitudinally across a spectrum of the results from any of the lenders that work in this ecosystem, because they don't publish the same information in an apples-to-apples manner. And that's per the regulations by the Federal Reserve, the FDIC, and other federal agency that oversees CRA programs. So the best data we have on down payment assistance comes from MSHDA, the Michigan State Housing and Development Authority, which has a very good program where you can get up to $10,000 in down payment assistance as long as the home meets the criteria of lendable and as long as the borrower meets the criteria of positive borrower. And that's when we start getting into the weeds of why transactions don't close.
But that MSHDA program isn't for conventional mortgages, is it? Isn't that for first time?
MSHDA program for conventional mortgages.
Can I just say something? We met with you were not available for the Bargain Block Community Financial Credit Union interview.
Yeah.
But during that interview, what they talked about with Bargain Block is the fact that they have mortgages. They sell the homes on TV. And sometimes it takes 5-6 months after that mortgage to close. A lot of owners, if you have a sales agreement, that sales agreement is kind of up before 5 or 6 months, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
The other thing is, if you look at the income limits that you 60 have,
to 90 days.
The income limits are pretty low, right? So we're talking about people who are earning, for one person, $43,740. For two people, $59,163.74, and it goes up. If you have 8 people in your family, you can earn $150,680. But so I suppose that the 8-person households may be able to demonstrate enough cash flow and enough, because it's not just based on credit; it's also based on debt to income ratio.
Debt to income.
And so the reality is that debt to income ratios, when your incomes are low, are challenging. Your credit scoring, the commercial credit scoring processes, the things that are scored and appreciated or that matter, don't always make sense for poor folks, right?
Is there a credit score requirement on this program?
It's typically 640 and up.
Yeah, This one does. Yes, there is a credit score on this program. In fact, I can tell you exactly what it is.
So while Donna's looking for that, how about I go through what the program is?
While Donna looks for it, we're going to take a quick break and we'll go through the program and tell everybody what that credit requirement is. More with David Palmer when we come back.
Bridge Detroit is your news and engagement platform that is telling the stories of Detroiters rooted by community priorities. Started in 2020 by Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Stephen Henderson, the newsroom has already established its footing as the go-to source for hyper-local perspectives that ask the hard questions, brings accountability, and searches out real solutions. It's free to become a member of this award-winning news organization. Visit bridgedetroit.com today to sign up to receive the news delivered right to your inbox. Bridge Detroit, by Detroiters, for Detroiters.
Have you always dreamed of being on the airwaves? Well, the Detroit Eastside Engaged Podcast Network, or DEEP for short, is here to make that dream a reality. Located inside the Stoudemire, the DEEP Network offers studio space and production staff to help get your podcast idea off the ground. Doesn't take a whole lot of work to get started. Just visit the Authentically Detroit page at ecn-detroit.org or call Sarah at 313-948-0344.
And we are back here on Authentically Detroit with David Palmer. We're talking about home buying assistance, down payment assistance programs here in the state of Michigan, particularly here in the city of Detroit. Donna, did you find that requirement?
I did not. I thought I read somewhere that it had to be somewhere like 600 or 640. I think David's correct, but I don't see it in this paperwork. So maybe that's inaccurate. But you need to have a bank letter agreement to lend, right? And banks don't typically lend if your income is too low. So the banks are not saying we're going to relax or eliminate our credit requirements. They're saying that you have to have an approval from a bank.
From the bank to
and
take
so
care, yeah.
what it would be interesting for us to actually talk to a bank and find out what their minimum credit requirements are for mortgages, but usually it is about 640. And those are usually pretty hard and fast rules. But in addition to having a 640 credit rating, and most Detroiters' credit ratings are lower than that, in addition to that, you also have to have a debt to income ratio that meets the banking requirements. And so, you can't owe money. And you have to have enough income. And that's the reason why so many people don't qualify for the 0% home loan programs for home repair, because of the debt to income ratio, not just the credit score.
Yeah. What say you, David?
So I want to go through some of the highlights of the program because, despite this conversation for the last few moments, this is actually a pretty amazing opportunity. So those that can qualify for this, I hope folks jump in and make it work and find a really good realtor who knows how to do business in the city of Detroit, because buying residential real estate in the city of Detroit is a different experience than any adjacent suburban community, right? So there are a range of things that we can get into that for the reasons for that. So what is the program? So $6 million of ARPA funds, American Recovery Plan Act, which Detroit got $820 some odd million from the federal government. So $6 million has been peeled off to focus on the program. It allows buyers up to $25,000 in down payment assistance, not to exceed 50% of the purchase price. The amazing thing about this program is that once you cover your down payment, your closing costs, and other fees associated with buying real estate, if there's money left over that you qualify for, it can roll directly to principal, the amount you owe, or even buy down the interest rate. So interest rates are hovering around 6% for borrowers right now, which after you do the math turns into a lot of money over a 30-year mortgage, right? So the flexibility of this program is unique and should be taken advantage of by everyone who can get in the door and make it happen. So you can't have owned a home in the last 3 years. You must meet the income requirements, which Donna alluded to, and there's a simple chart on DetroitDPA.org that tells about the income requirements, and the income requirements need to be documented. You're probably going to need 3 years of tax returns in order to demonstrate your income history with the lender that you choose to work with. So when we think about, this opportunity, you also need to take the HUD homebuyer education course. Like I said earlier, Detroit has twice as many as any other city in the United States with similar population. So there's lots of different places to take this class. You can go to Southwest Solutions. You can go to the Michigan State Extension at Focus Hope. You can go to, National Faith Homebuyers. You can go to Wayne Metro. There's lots of opportunities to take that class. And every adult in your household has to sit through that class, which is approximately 8 hours. And it runs you through a crash course of what homeownership means. If your family has been a renter for as long as you can remember, owning a home and taking care of a home is a much different exercise than dealing with a landlord. So those are the types of things that you need to keep in mind with this work. Now, when you're talking about the supply side of homes, here we go. As a general rule of thumb for the uninitiated, I'll say take the income that you have and double it, and that's approximately a good number for you to consider a mortgage amount. So if your household makes about $43,000, I wouldn't be shopping for a home that was valued on the marketplace at more than $86,000. So when I looked up the number of homes that were listed in Detroit for less than $90,000, I found about 800 properties.
Are they places that people will want to move into? Are these quality homes?
So this is the filtering process that a buyer needs to work with their realtor on. So if there's 800 homes listed for less than $80,000 in the city of Detroit, you can take about 80% of those off the table because they're in various states of needing repair. So the bargain block fellas can do that work. Normal humans do not have the ability to digest 3 seasons of HGTV or This Old House or whatever, TV show you like and actually make that work, because the intricacies and talent and tools and time and expertise and clearing permits process from the city of Detroit, none of that stuff is accessible to folks that aren't well trained in how to do plumbing, electrical, etc. So when we take 80% of those homes off the table, you're left with a few hundred properties that would meet the criteria to lend. Now, lending criteria doesn't necessarily mean that the home is move-in ready. And just because you walk into a house that's recently been flipped, I'm using air quotes, the flip actually causes me more challenges as a realtor helping my client than the home that needs renovations. Because once the flip has happened, you don't know how well they did the plumbing. You don't know if the tile was affixed to the kitchen floor the right way, or that the marble is of good quality that they put on the countertop. The homes that the land bank sells for rehab and ready actually use a thinner type of marble on those kitchen countertops than most folks would get when they walk in the door at a shop, because it's cheaper and they're buying it at volume. But a hard pan set on the countertop may crack that. So thinking about all of these things begins to narrow those 800 homes down to 20 to 50. And then you have the question of what neighborhood does the human want to live in? Right? So we know that if you want to live, in Jefferson Chalmers, then you have a range of options available to you, providing you're willing to purchase flood insurance, because if you're going to borrow other people's money to get a mortgage, you have to play by those rules, right? Where if you want to live in Rosedale Park or Southwest Detroit, there's different housing markets all over this huge city we have. So narrowing the number of homes down to those that are lendable, appraisable, and move-in ready enough for someone with limited income limited disposable income, at least, to drop $10 or $20 or $30,000 into renovations on a house is, becomes more art than science at some point.
Yeah.
So it's a question of market availability.
I'm going to say real quickly that Bargain Block is no longer selling homes for $85,000. They're selling homes for the minimum of $110,000 to $120,000. If you want to move into Jeff Chalmers, you're not going to spend $80,000 inside of Jeff Chalmers. You might find a home that is close to that, but again, you're talking about move-in ready. Most of the homes are still north of $100,000. So I do have a question, though, because if you have $25,000 in down payment assistance, then in a sense, for a $100,000 home, you are borrowing or financing $75,000. Does the math change when you have that kind of down payment assistance?
So, and that's the beauty of math, right? There's plenty of mortgage calculators that you can jump on the interwebs to find, from big search engines to local giant lenders to smaller lenders and credit unions. There's an awful lot of mortgage calculators out there. So what I generally recommend folks do is interview and identify a realtor early. The realtor can help you understand the potholes that you might hit and all of the moving parts that they're going to manage for what is typically the most expensive thing somebody ever buys. And it's super emotional for most people because you're imagining the place where you're going to live, potentially with the other humans that are close to you in your life, right?
Right, but I'm asking you a question because you said usually you tell people the rule of thumb is twice whatever your income is.
Correct.
And I'm asking you whether that twice whatever your income is factors in a $25,000 down payment, or is it twice? What does that mean? Are you saying you should not borrow more than double, or are you saying the home value should not be more than double?
If the home value is more than double what your income is, the math starts to be challenging when you run into problems.
Right, but I'm asking, is that calculated after you take off the $25,000?
So you can't count on getting the $25,000 until after you jump through a whole bunch of other people's
Right, but
hoops.
I'm just saying, let's say you can count on it.
And is it up to $25,000,
It's up to
or is
$25,000.
it $25,000 flat?
Up to $25,000.
Okay.
So
Gotcha.
I tend to be pretty conservative about these things and say, let's do the math assuming you're not getting help from anywhere else, because you still need a place to live.
Right, but we're talking about this program
Right.
specifically, so I'm trying to understand who can participate in this program. I understand a typical home sale, but you said this is a great opportunity. People need to jump on this. So I want people to have an understanding, if you're listening, who can jump on that. Does this mean that, let's say it's up to $25,000. I don't know what the factors are that would take it up to $25,000, but the question is, when you make those recommendations, are you assuming there will be a down payment of, say, $25,000 or thereabouts, or are you thinking that a lot of times people who are lower income are borrowing a higher ratio of the purchase price?
If you make the assumption and it doesn't work out, then it doesn't work out.
I get that. I'm
so
not
yes,
assuming this
you can make
program
the
will
assumption that the $25K is on the table and go for it, right? If it doesn't work out, then you might not be able to buy the house.
Well, you said earlier that you didn't think these houses were going to be sold anyway. I think that's how you began the show, by saying that you didn't think this was going to work.
It's a good chance that it's going to be challenging.
And then you also said this is a
good
great program,
opportunity.
jump on it. So I'm trying to understand how the opportunity works. If I make the assumption that I'm jumping through all of these hoops, and at the end of this jump, I'm going to have $25,000. Does that mean that it gives me more purchasing power than it would if I didn't?
It gives you more purchasing power than if you didn't have it.
Okay, that's really what my question was, that it seems like we could possibly, hopefully look at a larger universe of homes, because I do want people to use it. I'm not trying to be cynical about this.
I want people to use it too.
I want people to use it. I want people to also understand that sometimes these things are floated out there as promises because it sounds good for a politician to say we're extending this, or for a bank to say we're extending this, and you find out, and I think this is what David's research is, that all that sounds good does not necessarily end well for the purchaser.
Are the interest rates on this program fixed, or is that determined by the individual lenders?
You should only be going for a fixed interest rate on this program. I think there might be some ways around that, but that's hidden in the fine print. I generally do not recommend that people consider anything other than a fixed interest rate, because then at least you have predictability in what your monthly payment's going to be.
What are the interest rates trending at right now?
Roughly 6%. Plus or minus a fraction of a point. So step number one, talk to a realtor, get to know where your situation is in your finances and these things, and develop the relationship that you can trust the person. The realtor is going to be able to refer you to a range of lenders that you can interview to determine if you're qualified to borrow based on your credit score, your debt to income ratio.
Without a credit inquiry, you can interview lenders to see if there's likelihood that you can qualify without them doing an inquiry on your credit.
That can happen. They can do what's called a soft pull, but it doesn't give them the information to know what's going to be real to get you the pre-approval letter that's required to participate in this program.
I want to make sure that we're speaking in plain terms, because I'm thinking if you use the word interview, then that means I get to just have a conversation with multiple lenders without my credit being pulled, because that negatively affects my credit score, especially for low income people who probably already have low credit scores. So yes,
you're going to be working with your realtor and your lender for many months. So when I say interview them, you need to know that you can spend hours and hours sitting in a car with your realtor, driving from house to house as you're doing the things.
For sure.
Likewise with your lender, if they're not responsive to you in a way that you appreciate, there's a whole universe of lenders out there, right? So the lender needs to do a hard credit pull to determine your ability to meet their lending criteria. Generally speaking, if you do between 2 and 5 credit pulls in a single 45-day period for the purpose of getting a mortgage, it's not dinging your credit score in the way that, the apps will tell you it's end of times if you do too many credit pulls, right? So when I'm teaching that HUD homebuyer class, the second thing I ask folks after if they're using a realtor is, do you have a credit score app on your phone that is not attached to a credit card that you already have? Almost everybody raises their hands, and I say, please delete these apps. None of them matter from the lender's perspective. The lender is going to do credit pulls from the 3 credit bureaus, and the number that's in the middle is the one they use. They don't use FICO scores. They don't use Credit Karma scores. They don't use all of the crazy scores that you subscribe to. So go check your credit scores from the bureau directly. If there are things on there that you don't think should be there, take the time to get rid of them, and then talk to your lender and explain to them what's happening. The lender will have access to all that information. So you talk to your realtor, you talk to a lender, then you start shopping, right? So the realtor is going to be able to provide you homes in the neighborhoods that you want to live in. The realtor shouldn't be telling you about the neighborhoods. They shouldn't be telling you about crime rates or schools or any of that stuff. There's something called fair housing at the federal government and fair housing at the state level that says, me as a realtor, all I can do is deal with you as a human. You as the human are telling me what your criteria are for where your house is. And the city of Detroit is 130 some odd square miles of joy that you can find all kinds of different opportunities and neighborhoods in, right? So, there are pockets of joy throughout the city. There are challenges, obviously. We talk about them here all the time. But ultimately, you're trying to find a safe place for you and your family, and you are the person that drives the car as far as all of the criteria that you're looking for. So if you filter all of that criteria through the system into what's available in the market today, you get to a handful of homes that are available that you need to make the offer on. So I called National Faith Home Buyers earlier today and said, how long does it take to process this series of documents in order to be able to include it into a purchase offer agreement for the time you have in your transaction? So typically a transaction, once you get a seller to take the offer that you've made, you can count on 45 to 60 days before you sign all the paperwork and give them all of your money, or in this case, give them the federal government's money to the tune of up to $25,000, right? So in that time period, you have to do a lot of things, and your realtor is playing professional project manager to help you understand the deadlines, the goals, the requirements, and the outcomes. So if you're adding 2 weeks to the transaction, then your realtor and your lender need to be Johnny on the spot with the documents that they need to obtain from you to provide to National Faith Home Buyers so that they can vet your application against the criteria and perhaps answer questions and provide extra documents. right? So there's a pretty short timeline, and most sellers aren't willing to wait 4 to 6 months, as Donna mentioned earlier with the team that she's been talking with. So there's a lot of moving parts here, and ultimately you need a pro who knows how to work in the city of Detroit and a lender who's motivated to help you meet the goal. Because at the end of the day, neither the realtor nor the lender is making a whole lot of money off this transaction. And you need to find somebody who's interested in helping you as a client make this thing a reality, because we take a lot of satisfaction in seeing that smiling face with the homeowner.
How many homes have you sold with down payment assistance attached to them?
So several. MISHDA is the only program I've successfully closed.
Okay.
None of the other lender programs have worked out for one reason or another for my clients. So this program, like I said, the criteria is all on the website, so your realtor and your lender will know what's going on.
And so they should go
to drive it through.
People should go to DetroitDPA.org to look at the full criteria. How can folks get in contact with you if they want you to help them?
Can I just add one thing?
Yeah.
Before we move to close out this segment, I just want to say, I think we need to look at banking regulation. I think we need to look at reforming the system in addition to adding these little sweeteners, because it feels as though it's the banking regulation that causes the delays as much as anything. I've talked to others who, not just the folks on Bargain Block, but certainly when I talked to Community Financial Credit Union, they were trying to expedite the process themselves, and that may or may not, and I don't know if they're even considered part of this program. But it feels like the problem is systemic, not individual banks or not individual programs, because banks also have compliance issues that credit unions don't, which means that credit unions can have more relaxed standards. Where do you stand, and do you agree that we need to look at banking reform in order to make this possible?
I do think we need to look at banking reform. I was on the advisory panel for the Federal Reserve of Chicago Detroit branch for a number of years before the pandemic, talking about this, and nonprofits all across the city engaged, and banks with their Community Reinvestment Act managers engaged. And as we started to push back, thinking about what the outcomes were from the programs that they were so proud to roll out with 4-color brochures, and said, tell me what your outcomes were, and we'd get a respectful but blank stare coming back. So the Federal Reserve is right here in Detroit. If you have a nonprofit organization or a small business and you want some really swanky meeting space and really great food for catering, organize it, or better yet, give feedback, because the Community Reinvestment Act has been in a process of review, and the Fed is currently rewriting some of those standards in partnership with the 2 other federal agencies that promulgate those rules. So Rashida Tlaib, your representative in Detroit, and Representative Shri Thanadar are your 2 quickest ways to get a download of that information and give feedback. And then I really encourage folks to reach out to credit unions in particular and say, let's step up your game for residential mortgage lending in the city of Detroit, because you have great banking options for us, but you don't necessarily close as many loans as you might think we should.
Right. So that's the reason I want to once again shout out Community Financial. Tansley, credit union said we're going to do non-appraisal mortgages that also don't look at credit scores.
Sure.
And we have other ways of evaluating credit worthiness and the value of a home other than an appraisal. So I'm excited about that possibility, especially if you've been paying rent. There's so many other ways to do it. And I think it's important that we continue working with you, David, to track what happens with this program,
this
right?
Because
you have
crucial.
a way of getting the data,
yeah.
And when people make these big announcements, I don't want to use it necessarily to beat the city up. I want to use this to point out, wait a minute, even when you say $25,000 in down payment assistance without system reform, it's not going to help.
Yeah, it's worth noting that the MISHDA data that we looked at for down payment assistance from 2014 to 2019, Detroit was the 8th city in the state by volume of mortgages originated. Lansing was number 1 because Lansing had a down payment assistance and education program embedded in city government until their mayors changed. So, Warren, Lansing are both ahead of Detroit in the number of MISHDA down payment assistance loans that are originated in this town. So I think there's a lot of opportunities to track the data, and to be a cheerleader, to have the program be successful, I think you also need to be honest about the challenges that you're going to face in getting it done. So Orlando, you asked how do folks reach me? dcpalmer.com, Palmer, PALMER.com is my website URL. And you can find information about me, the research that me and my team do, as well as links to talk about the real estate side of the operation there. Or you can find me around the city. I spend a good amount of time downtown at my office on Washington Boulevard. I love Rosa, the coffee shop up in Grand Mountain, Rosedale. And I've actually been spending a lot of time at Donna's shop over at ECN. So if Donna wants to host a community conversation on this, then I'll be here and we can talk about it.
I do. And, for people looking for a realtor, are you able to connect people to opportunity? Can you service their realtor?
Yes,
right.
I will have that conversation, and if I can't and do the things you want me to do, I will refer you to someone I would trust to do it for me.
That sounds great, because it sounds as though you are willing to spend the extra time and effort to make sure that you get people to close, even though you may not make as much money on those sales. It's so important to me that people have access to a range of housing, and you've been doing a lot of really valuable research. I was connected to you, I think, by Ian McCain, who at the time was working at ECN, and said you guys really need to work with him. You were doing a project, I think, at that time with Michigan State. And so I want to thank you for your work and for your research and your commitment to helping us understand facts. Facts are your friends, right? And I'm not trying to be a downer, Debbie Downer, when I point out these things are difficult. I've just seen too many people get excited and believe I'm about to become a homeowner and hit unanticipated hurdles. And so if we can at least let people anticipate the hurdles, then they can think ahead.
That's
I want to see that 19% success rate get into the 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s until home buying is entirely normalized by all of the humans that want to buy a house in the city of Detroit.
I love it. Listen, if you have topics that you want discussed on Authentically Detroit, you can hit us up on our socials at Authentically Detroit on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, or you can email us at authenticallydetroit@gmail.com. All right, it is time for shout-outs. Donna, let's start with you. You have any shout-outs?
I do. I want to thank Charity Dean from the Metro Detroit Black Business Alliance, and Dwan Dandridge from Black Leaders Detroit, and Chase Cantrell from Building Community Value, as well as Tony McElwain and others. The legend, and Angela Brown Wilson for helping to cultivate thinking about how we can do business differently in our community. There are people who really do want to see change. We need change. If we're going to have a changed society, that means that we're going to need change in how people show up in so many different ways. And I just love the innovators and the thought partners who come together to help innovate and make change. And then I want to thank David also for coming on the show today once again.
Shout out to you, David. Do you have any shout outs?
Very kind. Yeah, I want to shout out to all the folks that are going to be cleaning up our neighborhoods with Motor City Makeover programs. I saw folks out in Rosedale Park over the weekend while I was cleaning up my own gardens. I know those dates sort of roll over the next couple of months. So if you've got a chance to go join with neighbors and, help spruce up your neighborhood, it does an awful lot for your mind, body, and soul to live in a place that you feel connected and respected in.
Yes.
I love it. I'd like to shout out my cousin Kiera and now my new cousin Cal on tying the knot on yesterday. Congratulations to the Johnsons. My cousin Kiera was a beautiful, beautiful bride. And her bouquet, it was really, really sweet because she's a twin. And we lost our cousin and her sister Tiara back in 2013 after a long bout with cancer, and they're literally 2 years younger than I. So she was very young, and she had been battling that illness since we were children, and we all went and graduated from Eastern Michigan University together. So to see Kiera going, and it was hard for her going about life without literally a piece of her here. Really, really made me happy, and she was a beautiful bride. So shout out to my cousin Kiera and my new cousin Calvin. So happy to see you guys happy. All right, that's going to do it for this episode of Authentically Detroit. We want to thank you so much for listening with us, and until next time, catch the wave.